22. We're going to do two things today. We're going to kind of introduce roofs and talk about the different types that we have and the materials that we use with them. Not really the drawing aspect of it, other than kind of give some concepts about it. We will come back and handle chapter 23 on a different day, probably 2 days from now, and we will draw our roof plan together as a group, which in essence is 23 is the application of our roof plan. In essence, we're going to do a roof framing plan. That's mostly what drafters do. I also want to handle your code worksheets a little bit today. If there's any issues on that or finding that information, I want to open that up and say, hey, here's where it is, here's what the code says, and answer any questions you may have on that. I did put a due date on your code sheet. It is for Wednesday, end of day. But once we got that, then we can start moving forward with it. All right, chapter 2 is roof plan components. In essence, let's just start by talking about what a roof plan is. Page 550 and 551 show you a couple good examples. When we talk about a roof plan, in essence, as you draw it, it's another plan view like your floor plans, except that it's taken at a different location. With a floor plan, that was a full section cut 4 feet off the floor, right? And we threw the whole top away, the roof and everything. So on this is going to be your true top view as far as the glass box goes. In essence, picture yourself in a hot air balloon sitting right above it and you're looking straight down on the structure. Okay? That in essence is a roof plan. Now with that said, you can see on this drawing right here, which is a true roof plan, what do we see as we look at that from that orientation? In essence, you see all of the edges of planes. That's what these bold lines are right here. When you do that, what we talk about here are the edges, roofs, and valleys. That in essence is what we mean. So I'm just going to kind of hold this up. This one doesn't have everything on it, but here's a little model. So if you're looking at it from this view, the edges would be these edges right here that go along the outside. Those would be described by these lines around the outside. When we talk about a ridge, what we're talking about is a high spot where the roof meets. Like this profile right here, this line would be considered a ridge right here. And again, you look at it from this view, okay, it's just going to be a line, right? And in essence, you're looking at inclined planes. Okay, so these are all foreshortened surfaces that you see. That is a ridge. Now, this one doesn't truly have it, but kind of got this dormer built on the side. And where this roof comes and intersects this other roof, the intersection between them right here would create what we call a valley. Okay. And these terms come right from topography of the earth, right? Think of it that way. When you think of a valley, you got two ridges that come down and meet, and usually there's a stream in the bottom, right? We call that a valley. Same thing on a roof. Okay. A ridge would be the top part. So as I look at this roof, this line right through here, all of these are all ridges. They're high spots of the roof. Now we do have some valleys. This is a valley right here. This is where I've got two planes coming together and they create that valley look. Here's another one right here. Okay. Another one right here, another one here, another one here, here. Okay. Those are all valleys. Now, you can't really tell that until you get familiar with roof shapes and you're looking at this and then you start saying, oh, well, that's got to be this. And it takes a little bit of time to do this. Keep in mind, that's what your lines are. You're describing edges, ridges, and valleys. When you draw this, those edges, ridges, and valleys, they should be very thick lines. Okay? So we use 0.031 inches for it. We don't use object lines. Very, very thick lines. And that's a convention to doing roof plans. So we really want those to pop. Now you'll typically see a hidden line in a roof plan also. You see it on this one coming around here? This is the outside of your bearing surface. Typically an exterior wall. A lot of people will actually show the entire wall width because it bears on the whole wall. But technically you only have to give the outside line. And what that basically states is that as this truss comes along, that's where it's going to bear on it. Okay. Now if I didn't have a wall, I had a beam, I would still show it. I'd have that beam as either a center line or a hidden line, and I would call out the beam size. But then the truss designer then knows what I'm carrying this weight with, right? Because it's up in the air, we've got to support it. Okay. So those are the two components you typically do. Now this bearing is just a hidden line, standard conventions on that. Okay. So that's in essence what you are showing. That's for a roof plan. Okay. Now, who is this drawing intended for? As we get ready to draw it, we got to know who our readers are, right? We've talked the floor plans are primarily for our framers, right? It's certainly our clients to define the spaces, but ultimately to get it built, it's for the framers. Who gets this drawing? Yeah, I mean, if we are in the residential market, almost always this is going to a truss manufacturer. So that is your client on this drawing. We do not do the truss design. It is the one drawing that is required in almost every municipality to be a stamped drawing. By that, a professional engineer would stamp it. An architect can't stamp these. Now, the truss companies provide that service for you. Okay. So you basically give them this, they draw it up, they have an engineer stamp it, they build it there, and they confirm it, and they provide you with the stamped drawings that go to the job site. No, it's just something you pay. You go pay $5,000 for a truss package that goes in the structure, the drawings will come with it. Now, that's not always true. If you get into certain locations and you're doing commercial, an architect may hire an engineer to do the roof because we might be going with a rafter setting and we're not using a truss or something like that. In that case, it would be a structural engineer who would provide those drawings. Expect to pay their rates. It's just part of what you got to do. For the residential market, we're almost always trusted. So this is a true roof plan right here. Now, scale-wise, the author kind of talks about that down through the text. This one's at an 1/8 inch. The ones on the next page are at an 1/8 inch. Typically, we can go to an 1/8 inch on these drawings if we wish. Guess why? There's not a lot of dimensional information that goes on these. The roof is built on the walls. The walls are built first. We're not changing the walls for the roof. The roof's going to change for the walls. So in essence, we don't put any dimensional information on here, except for eaves. That's about all we dimension. The wall widths are already, all of that stuff's all given in the floor plan, so we're not going to reproduce it here. So you can do an 1/8 inch, because really all you're doing is showing geometry. Okay. Very little dimensions. They do kind of show us we got a couple dimensions for eave width here. And we might change it on gable ends versus the tail ends of the trusses. Okay. So that's about all you really do. Okay. Here's actually the eave for this one. Here's the eave on your gable ends. Now, most people will take this drawing and add some structural information to it to aid the truss designer. So let's go to the next page. We have two drawings here. And in essence, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do a roof plan, but we're going to do what we call a roof framing plan. In essence, we are going to outline the roof, edges, roofs, valleys. Okay. Very thick line. You see that same floor plan here. So these are still those very thick lines. They're still the same. But then, based on what's going on underneath, we are going to identify the truss shape that we desire. Because we may have vaulted rooms, We may have flat ceiling rooms below it. We may have overhangs that we're doing, things like that. So we're calling out the truss size. And both of these are the exact same drawing, they're just shown in different formats. We'll talk more about this in a bit, but let's just kind of look at those two different formats here. I'm going to go to the top one. And by the way, between these two drawings we see here, I've talked to many truss designers in our area, and they don't care which method you use. They're familiar with both. I've asked them several times, do you prefer this? Do you prefer that? Really, this one requires less building knowledge, but they say, we'll take this over it because we're doing our own thing anyway, we're just going to make it happen. You don't know what we know. We know that. This gives that information. The bottom one, you pretty much have to have built a roof almost to draw that one. So what we're doing here, they've got a center line coming through here. Center lines denote areas where trusses change. And then generally what we do is we just put a line here, and this goes on my text layer, and it's got two big arrows on it. And then we label right along that line what we want for our truss. Now this one's a hand-stacked area. This is an old drawing because it's a HIT drawing. It's being built on site. Now notice on this one, the arrows start here, but it doesn't really end anywhere. Kind of hits here. And it says 2 by 6 at 24 inches on center. That's going to be built on the site. And we want them to use 2 by 6s for the truss component or the rafter components. This one's really more of what you generally do right here, where you take the arrow, it terminates on bearing because we know it's going to bear there, here and here. And then laying along that line, we say, I want a hip truss, and we're going to do it with a spacing of 24 inches on center. Now what that means is there's going to be a hip truss that's right here, 24 inches, another one, 24 inches, another one, until we get to this zone. Okay. So everything in this zone is going to be a hip truss. Once we get to here, we are now going to a standard or a flat bottom truss, but it's going to have a scissor in it. Now a scissor is an interior vault. You'll see these truss shapes here in a bit. And that's going to run from here to here. Now we do have kind of these ends going on and stuff too, but that's the main truss that's coming. So every 2 feet, one there, one there, one there, one there, blah, 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 until they get to the other side. So in essence, to do the framing plan, you denote areas, put your framing note, and then label along it the truss shape. Yes?
So if you do the more simple version, you're just letting them do whatever they want? Or do you give that information to them in a different way?
No, they get to do what they want for the truss. Now, when we say, like, here's a scissor truss which has an interior vault to it, they'll have to go to the floor plan and say, oh, there's a bedroom right here, and we told them I want this vaulted. And so then they will go flat until they hit that bedroom, and then they'll put a little vault in that.
So I guess my question is really, how on the more, like the one from page 555, if you want that vaulted ceiling in the bedroom, how do you give them that information on this more simple style?
A variety of ways. I generally do it one of two ways. If it is a very simple one, like a scissor, and it's obvious, in the room title, I think you folks asked me this question earlier, I asked you to put the width and height of the room, right, as you see it, for your design. But then when I actually produce the drawing, I get rid of that information once it's dimensioned, and I put in flooring and roof type. So they would have to go look at the master, and they would see carpet, vault. And then the truss designer would know, oh, this room's vaulted. Now, when you get complicated ones, that doesn't work real well. And so in essence, what you are forced to do at that point is cut a section through it and draw it and say, this is what I need this bottom to look like. Don't try and think, you're not going to do the rest of the truss or anything, that's them. But you have control over the top plate and the bottom plates and how those are going to be. And you can give them dimensions, and they'll hold to those as well as they can. If they can't make it work, they'll probably give you a call and say, you know, I gotta bury this truss somewhere, I can't put some girders in here or something, and you would then have a conversation on how to solve that problem. Yes?
So when you go to some big master bedrooms and they have the, like, cut out and it goes up, is that
Copper
done?
ceiling?
Is that done through the truss company, or is that a standard truss and then the contractor build that down?
It's done both ways. Sometimes, in today's world, I'll tell you, there's really nothing they can't build in the truss system. It's pretty incredible. But a lot of times what they'll do is they'll just leave you a square or a box truss, and then the framers come in and add a shelf to it or something like that. It's the framer's job to alter that truss if we need it.
Do you call that a box truss in here as well?
Well, there's different shapes. We'll go through the shapes here right at the very end. Okay. So yeah, it's a combination of all that. Hopefully we can build it in the truss. I'll tell you, I've had a lot of problems where I sit there and look at that roof and I think about it and I think about it, and then I go talk to the truss designer, and what they can do with girders and stuff in this day and age is really pretty incredible. And they can carry a tremendous amount of weight.
So if you had something wrong in your valleys, where structurally, where they would fix it for you?
Generally,
And
yeah. Like if you give them an interior bearing and you make them a note, I don't want this here, but I can give it to you if you want, but it's gonna cost a lot. Almost always they can carry it off the exterior wall.
Okay.
They can do some really nice stuff. I think I talked about those truss designers right at the very start, in that it is a drawing specialty that is generally handled by drafters, where that's what they do. And they do it all day, every day. Now, the bottom one is the same drawing. This is the exact same type of drawing. This is a rough framing plan. Again, we got our very big, bold lines representing edges, ridges, valleys. But on this one, instead of having just a framing note with a type of truss, here they've come in and put a center line that is the center of each truss. And so, in essence, we're trying to frame this with lines here. Okay. So, like, an example would be the skylight that comes in here. Okay. So we're coming in and we're saying, you know what, you're not going to be able to carry this thing on your doing, so I want you to put two 2x12s in here, and then we'll frame in between them. We're going to hang off of that for these. And so you're taking an effort to actually build this with line work, but it's the exact same thing as the above drawing. But here you're taking it out of the truss designer's hands. We're doing it ourselves. Like I said, I wouldn't even really attempt this unless I had built some roofs. Okay? And I really understood how it all went together. Okay? But in essence, it's the same plan as the one you saw above. Okay? Do people use this? Yeah, there are quite a few people out here that do it. I've done them before. But I built a lot of roofs. Mary Wannenberg, one of my favorite drafters I work with in the residential market, she does these, but she grew up in a contracting family. She built several roofs herself, or been involved in it. But you kind of need that knowledge to do this. Okay. That's a little further than we're going to go here. We're going to do the one that's above this. Right. That's the one that is typically done by people who have not been in the construction trades, yes.
That still goes to the truss company? Are you saying you're
It can be.
bypassing the truss?
It can be. This can bypass it. In fact, this one, here in this drawing, they've got an existing truss system, so I think we're doing an addition here, and they're going to use a rafter beam set up on
And
it.
you can legally do that? Who stamps it? Who
This would have to be stamped by a structural engineer.
Still, okay, structural.
Yeah. In every county I know of, except for Custer County, because the IRC required. So ultimately, that's what you're looking for in a roof plan. Now, let's kind of back away from the plan for the rest of this, and let's talk about different shapes that we're going to deal with. Now, I guess that begs the question, why do we put a roof on a building? Well, why is it there? What's that?
Protect from the elements.
Yes, one reason, protect from the elements. Okay. Is there another reason?
It looks good.
It can aesthetically help the roof. So let's take this calculator as a wall. So I build a wall like such.
Coupled together.
What happens when a wind hits it?
It blows over.
Right? It's a big kite. Well, if I put a top structure and hold it, now when the wind hits it, what happens to it?
Stays in.
It stays there. So ultimately, it's there for two reasons. Okay? And First, it's there to provide lateral support for the walls, okay, so that it doesn't topple over. Okay, we got to tie these top portions of our structure, okay, or they will fall over. That's ultimately the first reason why it's there. The second reason is the roof will be adapted due to your climate on its shape. And I kind of just drew a couple pictures on here so you can think about this. So the first reason, we need to tie it together so when we have this force called wind, and you think the wind blows here in the Magic Valley. In fact, that's one of the major reasons when I got out of high school, I blew out of this area, I hated the wind. Guess what I found out after traveling around the world?
Wind goes everywhere.
Wind blows everywhere. We are not unique to that. Okay, so it will blow, no matter where you're at on the planet. So that's the first thing we want to do, is stop that thing from tilting. Now, when we come to the shape, that is really going to be based on where you're at. Okay, and I kind of just threw two perfect drafted drawings to explain this. In the southern climates, what are most of our roofs? Okay, they're flat, because in essence, they're not holding a lot of weight. Okay, they're protecting from the elements. Now, a flat roof is not flat, okay, and we'll get into that more here in a minute. They still have weight that they have to handle. Rain is the same thing as snow, it just comes in a different form. Water is heavy. But since it's the water in the rain form is viscous, by that flows, okay, we don't have the same problems. It's not going to stay there if we give it a little slope. When we get to the north, what do? We pitch it, right? And primarily, why do we pitch it? So
Really snow.
it sheds that weight, right? Gets built up so much and then it falls off. But it has to hold water temporarily, so we pitch our roofs in the north. No reason to in the south, because they don't get snow. Now, do we have pitched roofs in the south? Oh yeah. Okay. Kind of like you said a moment ago, Lisa, it can be an aesthetic reason. Do we have flat roofs in Twin? Got a lot of them. Okay. We just have to plan for that weight that is going to be up there for a long time. Okay. So we just need to take those into consideration. In fact, almost all commercial buildings have what? A pitched or a flat roof? They have this, right? Commercial buildings, for the most part. Residential structures, what do we have? We have pitched, right? The difference between the two? Flat roofs, we're hiding equipment, we're carrying weight up there. Residential, we don't put that up there. We have mechanical rooms, so we're not holding furnaces, AC units and stuff, where on commercial, you're putting those up in the roof. Residential, we don't. Okay. So that's kind of it. We already talked about scale. The first thing we ought to probably do is talk about roof pitch. This is talked about on page 552, 553. When we do roof pitch, I'll start with figure 22.5. We denote it with this symbol right here, which is just two parts of a right triangle. And we give the rise and run of the roof. So in essence, it's done like a right triangle, and you give the length of the sides. So you'll see this is a 112, 212, 312. Almost always we do it with a conversion of some portion of 12. As this number rises, the roof gets steeper. A 112 would mean that I go 1 vertical unit for 12 horizontal, just like that shows. This says a 612. What that means is I'm going to go up 6 units over 12, up 6 over 12, and then that defines a slope, correct?
Yes.
So in essence, we give roof pitch by rise over run. And we use that symbol. Now, when you draw this symbol, this goes generally on your elevations and sections. It doesn't go on the roof plan because we don't see this view on a roof plan, right? We're looking straight down. We see inclined surfaces. So this is generally called out on elevations. You don't have to draw this at 6 and this at 12. It's a symbol. Okay? Make it look good and you just label it. Okay? That's in essence what you do. I put it on the text layer. They give you another diagram of that down on figure 22.7. if you wish to draw in angles, you can use the chart on table 22.1 on page 553, or you can run your own trigonometry to define this. This is SOHCAHTOA, right?
Yes.
Okay. Right angle trigonometry, Pythagorean theorem, SOHCAHTOA, and you can figure your own angles, but they give you a chart right here. By the way, they call it out as 22 degrees, 30 minutes. What's 30 minutes?
30 degrees.
Half.
Half a degree. This is the same as 22.5 degrees, yes.
How come a 612 is a 22 and a half?
Because it just isn't.
It's half of a 45.
Because it's, remember, it's proportional to the sides. Okay? And so when you take one side, you would think, okay, well, a 12-12 is a 45-degree angle. So if I take a 612, shouldn't it be 22 and a half? But it's not, because the sides, as they come down, they're not proportional in their length in exactly that fashion. It actually kind of, as you change, it's got to get longer and longer to have that happen. Okay. Anyway, here they are. By the way, these are approximates. If you run trig, you're not going to get 18 and a half degrees. You're going to get 18.2 or something like that. So generally, I'll show you when we draw our sections. I generally draw these by doing rise over run and then using that to define the angle. But generally, you're not going to probably use that. Now, along with that, we do have an issue that's going to come up. Now, I'm going to save this issue for now, is how do we use the eave of the roof? So here's that outside line, right? So as we looked at the roof plan, this line right here, you saw that in the roof line as a hidden line, right? It's the outside of my bearing. And then this was your roof edge. Well, how do we take this out? How far